Hi everybody, Al Bernstein here with another one of my quick hits videos. And on this one, I'm going to look back at this weekend and the activity that we had in combat sports, but not so much the boxing that happened this last weekend, but the UFC 189, the mixed martial arts action on Saturday night, which, as it turns out, not just by my account, and I'm certainly not a mixed martial arts expert, though I have seen my share, but according to most people, this UFC 189 was perhaps one of the best cards ever in the history of mixed martial arts. And how do I know it was so good? Well, because I was at Legacy Stadium in the Palazzo in Las Vegas, where I was able to see all the action along with a lot of great fans there, and shared the moment with my pal Dan Parks, who of course produces our boxing hangouts. And as you can see, we had a wonderful time there. We drank, we ate very well, and we had all kinds of fun watching these matches. And I want to bring my man Dan in right now. Dan, this was truly an extraordinary evening of combat sports. You know, when you and I went over there, of course, we hoped that it would be a lot of fun. You were here in town, and we were looking forward to what we thought was going to be a very interesting card, and certainly the main event with Conor McGregor and Chad Mendes looked like it was interesting. And I'll lay this one on you first, because God knows you've seen a lot more mixed martial arts than I have, and you're much more well-versed in the sport. I personally thought it was one of the great nights of combat sports that I've ever seen. Would you go that far?
I'm going to go right there with you, Al. That was unreal. And, you know, everybody I've talked to today, and not to mention the 20,000, however many thousand Irish that were at MGM on Saturday night, certainly thought it was the greatest fight of all time. It was insane. And you know, the thing is, while we were at Legacy Stadium, we were inside. The place was completely packed. There was even people standing outside looking through the windows to look in to watch this fight. Unreal.
It was amazing. And, of course, the atmosphere at the MGM was pretty amazing. But where we were, Legacy Stadium, it was terrific as well. And all through the city, you know, this fight resonated. When the telecast, you and I were watching that telecast, when it came on, I made the comment to you, and it really felt that way, both on the broadcast and where we were sitting and everywhere. I said, this feels Hagler Hearns-ish to me. It really did. The atmosphere in that arena, partially because of the many Irish fans, and you made the point that, you know, it was very Ricky Hatton-esque in terms of the way the UK fans come over here when he's fighting. So the atmosphere was extraordinary, and many times the atmosphere outstrips the actual action that happens on a card. Well, not so on this one. And the action in this started early in the evening. The fights were all good, but one of the matches in the undercard was so extraordinary that on any other given night it would have been the fight of the night. Not so on this one, and that was Dennis Bermudez taking on a terrific young man in Jeremy Stephens. Jeremy Stephens came into this fight the underdog, having lost a couple of fights in a row. And early on in the match, Dennis Bermudez was having his way against Stephens, but then things completely flipped, and that's one of the themes of this evening that we're going to talk about. And what made it so special, that in each of these matches that we're going to talk about, things changed so dramatically and so quickly. Stephens looked like he was completely out of the match, almost submitted. He was bloodied. His face was a bloody mess. The first of what would be a theme for the rest of the evening. And he was able to come back and beat Bermudez. You made the point that it was an upset because Stephens was the underdog in this match, and I think while certainly people gave him a chance to win, because he had to come back from so much adversity, it made it even more dramatic.
Absolutely. And there was also a lot of talk about him not making weight ahead of time.
Yes.
And so then it looked like Bermudez was just dominating him. And that knee was just absolutely, that's textbook. That was absolutely gorgeous.
He hit it. Yeah, Stevens had hit him with a knee. Stevens had been landing uppercuts when Bermudez came in, lunging in. And I personally think that, he realized he was hurting him with the uppercuts, but thought, well, if I can time his knee, that will be the thing that will finish the fight. And of course, it's exactly what happened. And for those boxing fans watching this, the reason I make the analogy is it really fascinated me, because you could see, and in boxing you see it, when a fighter lunges in and leaves himself unprotected, the uppercut is always one of the biggest punches in boxing. Now, and the one that hurts the most. Having been in the ring, I can tell you that nothing hurts more than getting hit with an uppercut. But this fascinated me because it was clearly a case where he understood that landing that uppercut with his hands was working, but he wasn't knocking him out with it, and this was going to do the trick. And when he came in, he brought that knee up, and it was shattering, and it got him the win. And so while MMA fans and UFC fans are not forgiving of people not making weight, I think in this case, Stevens kind of got them back on his side, didn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? It opens up a door for him again. And now Bermudez has got to go back to the drawing board again. He was on a great trek on his way up. And I don't think you can't take anything away from Bermudez either, because, that was a hell of a fight. All of these guys that night, how could you say anything about anybody? Everybody was ridiculous.
They were all warriors, and that brings us to the co-main event on this card, which was, I'm not even going to try and find adjectives for it, because I won't find the right one. Ruthless Robbie Lawler takes on Rory McDonald. They had fought before, and Lawler had won a unanimous decision in what was a very exciting fight, but nothing compared to the match they put on this Saturday. There was an ebb and a flow to this match. Just when you thought one man was going to had the other guy in trouble, the other man would come back. And it went this way throughout, really. And early in the match, Dan, I'll ask you this. When McDonald was doing good work and Lawler appeared to hit kind of the wall in this fight, did you think at that point when Lawler kind of hit that wall that maybe McDonald was going to take over? It seemed like that to me.
Yeah, I think it was actually a right kick to the head that made that was the first real kind of chink in the armor for Robbie Lawler, who looked just incredible up until that point. And then it was such an amazing job of survival by Rory. Again, neither one of these guys could possibly hang their head. And let me show you this great picture of the two of them after the fight.
Classic.
Look at this. And Robbie, he had that. His whole lip was just completely slashed on the right-hand side. It looks like they they were both getting hit by trucks.
Both their faces were masks of blood during the course of this fight, and you see there the two men, of course, together. And one of the things that I think was great was the respect they showed after this fight. And here's where in the MMA world and the UFC world, and this is one of the things I like about the way the sport is structured, Rory McDonald doesn't do any harm to his reputation or to his ability to get in big fights because of the loss, even though he was stopped because of the way he fought and because of how great that fight is. Correct me if I'm wrong. They could probably sell this rematch for the third. They could probably make this a trilogy, couldn't they?
Absolutely. I'd pay to see that again. And that could have been a headliner fight all by itself. That was sick.
Yeah, and many are saying it was one of the 2 or 3 best championship fights the UFC has ever had. Would you put it in the top 5 of ones you've seen? Hard to
Yes,
tell.
it is. I was there for the UFC fight week, and I was there with people like Don Fry. And I think about some of those that were they just sat there for 6 minutes pounding on each other, and the all-time fights now are getting to be so vast. But this was absolutely one of the best championship 5-round. One of the best fights I think I've ever seen as far as championship fights. It reminded me a lot of that John Jones Gustafsson fight, right? Yeah, I mean they were both right there.
That's a good analogy. It was really exciting, and for the folks that are watching this that may occasionally see MMA or not, you need to understand that if you watch this, if you're a combat sports fan, which is I'm sure you are if you're watching this hangout, this Quick Hits video. You'll enjoy this. It's fascinating. And by the way, one of the things that and we're going to talk about Conor McGregor and Chad Mendes, one of the things for all the folks watching who are boxing fans, very good striking by all 6 of the fighters we're talking about here. Good striking in a lot of ways. Look, we understand that because MMA fighters have to worry about kicks and other things and being off balance, they can't often have the same technique as a boxer would have as a striker, and so sometimes they aren't going to have as good leverage and all the rest. These 6 fighters had terrific leverage on their punches, and they were great strikers. Now, the last fight of the evening was the one that people came to see. The build-up to this fight, the lead-in, gave me goosebumps. Watching Sinead O'Connor, seeing as Conor McGregor came in, and Dan, you've got some Irish blood in you, but even for those of us who are not Irish for real, but only celebrating St. Patrick's Day, I'll tell you what, it gave you goosebumps, didn't it?
It was goosebumps time, and I was totally expecting Sinead O'Connor to tear up a picture of Chad Mendes at the end of the performance.
That's safer than when she tore up the Pope's picture, huh?
Hey, you know what? Wait, I'm going to give you a kind of an interesting, because we're crossing over here into boxing. I know I'm not the only person here that I'm making some comparisons, and not on skill levels, obviously, but maybe even by the time we're through, between Conor McGregor and Muhammad Ali on the psychological warfare aspect here. I think he did to Jose Aldo exactly what Ali did to Sonny Liston, okay? And he's completely got him out of the game, and I'm not sure even when they come back and fight again in Las Vegas later in the year, if Aldo's ever going to get back into this game mentally, because of just what a command performance. Even, remember in the beginning of the fight, how because he hadn't had a lot of time to really get into Mendes' head, but he kept passing the center of the ring before the fight even started to stake the territory. Yep. And I read later that one of the things that he was telling Mendes was, let's see who takes the first step back. Now the talk is over. Let's see who takes the first step back. And then he sprinted to the center of the ring and let Mendes take the first step back. And McGregor said, that's when I knew I won the fight, because he took the first step back.
Well, the irony, that's and for when during the press tour when it was going to be Aldo against McGregor, and as you point out, McGregor had lots of more time with him, and many people believe that McGregor had kind of won the psychological battle. Mendes had before the fight been, and you made the point to me as he was sitting there at Legacy Stadium, he seemed like he was uncowed by the what had gone on. And to some degree, even when the fight began, probably demonstrated he wasn't in some way, because he controlled a good portion of the first couple of rounds in that fight. Had his good, McGregor, of course, the better striker, but Mendes is a good striker. He had his moments, was able to get McGregor down on the ground in this fight, and when he did, control the action. And in that first round, looked like there were some anxious moments for all those Irish fans and for McGregor himself. But clearly he didn't lose confidence, McGregor. And once the fight wore on, you mentioned it to me even right before the end, that the conditioning of Chad Mendes, who only had about a 2 or 3 week training camp for this, that his conditioning probably played a role because he started to get kind of tired. And after one of those periods where he had McGregor on the ground and did do some good work with elbows and some ground and pound, but didn't get it all done, he got up and McGregor was able to get to him with some very, very big shots.
He sure was.
And as we see, there, McGregor landing the straight left hand, and Mendes had been hurt to the body before this, Dan, and that probably was the key, wasn't it? After he got up, great body work added to the fatigue that Mendes had.
Absolutely. Well, you know, and that's another thing that McGregor said. You know, he was very comfortable. This was the big challenge. He had never been up against a wrestler. And, you know, everybody had seen previous to this that the man has just excellent spacing as far as his stand-up is concerned. And you saw him, he's pretty laser guided in there once he has a little room to work. But Mendes, I think if Mendes would have had a 3-month camp like McGregor had a 3-month camp, we probably would have seen a 5-round fight. And yeah. I'm not sure that the results would be any different, but I think that you would have been able to see Mendes keep him on the mat maybe a little bit longer than he was able to on Saturday night.
And it's interesting, you made the point that McGregor has been submitted in his career. That's not Mendes's game necessarily. He is a good wrestler, but it's more ground and pound when he gets you down there. When we look ahead with Conor McGregor, having won this fight, and he's already been installed, I believe, a 2-1 favorite if he should fight Aldo, if in fact they do fight next. Do we see? Are we looking down the line at McGregor being only really in trouble if he faces somebody that is a good submission artist? Okay,
so the other real danger guy here is Frankie Edgar, right?
Yeah, who was there right outside, the cage talking to him.
Yeah, he was ready to make a move, and right away, he's wanting to jump Aldo to get into the next spot. And I think psychologically he's probably a better opponent than Aldo, but he's not a better. You know, it's really strange. Before this fight, I would have said Frankie Edgar would be a more difficult challenge. I'm not sure any of them are going to be a challenge for him now. I mean, he literally should be able to. He could clean out this whole division.
Well, we saw Conor McGregor go down. We saw that Mendes was able to make the takedowns, but there was toughness from McGregor when he was on the ground, even though he, as you point out, his skills are somewhat limited there, but nonetheless, as defensively, he was able to get the job done, and that's the whole point. So if he can just get back up, he's got you in trouble, and that's really.
And he was active. And he was active off of his back. He was throwing elbows off his back. He was, it wasn't incredible, but it was enough to be able to show that he knew what he was doing there, which I think a lot of people were not that confident he was going to be able to handle that now.
Yeah, who knew? Because they hadn't really. So an amazing night. That match ends, and then of course the accolades begin, in terms of people showering praise on this card, and I think I said to you, probably from the UFC standpoint and maybe MMA standpoint, that scenario was probably the perfect scenario for them, and McGregor afterwards celebrating with his trainer Kavanaugh, and it's probably the perfect scenario because Conor McGregor got his win and solidified his spot as this marketing center point for the UFC, and yet created a great fight in the process. So in a way, it was the perfect scenario for the sport, probably, I'm guessing, huh?
And another comparison to Ali. Here's another guy who calls the rounds.
Yes.
He's going to finish a fight, and he did it. And and again, it was just announced not too long ago that he actually wanted to place a $3.5 million bet on himself to win the fight in the second round, and he wanted to bet against his bosses, Fertitta and Dana White. I mean, you gotta love. I mean,
he is an original. And for the folks, if you're somebody watching this and you haven't really looked at Conor McGregor, take a look at this guy. He is unique. It's pretty astonishing. So the overall experience, I have to say, for me was really a great one. Watching I mean, of course, I've seen UFC cards and I watch them frequently. And as many of you know, I do enjoy mixed martial arts, though I don't profess to be an expert by any stretch of the imagination. But this particular night was pretty extraordinary. It was great to spend it with you, Dan. Also, we should mention the setting we were at, Legacy Stadium, which we pointed out at the Palazzo, was a great site to watch this card at. It was fantastic.
It was amazing. And you know what? The people, having that many people there, the energy that was there, again, it's a perfect facility to watch something like this. Not only mixed martial arts, but boxing. I mean, they've got and with the recliners and the leather chairs and all the goodies.
Yeah, it's fun.
That's the place to go.
And I should point out, and Dan was there, of course, many fans coming up to me and talking to me about boxing, only further proving the point that there is such a crossover between the two sports that, yes, some people are going to like one sport better than others, some are not going to like one of the other sport, but for the most part, there are many, many, many fans who like both of these combat sports, and it was a lot of fun. So I tweeted afterwards that this was one of the best nights of combat sports I have ever seen in my 30-some years as a broadcaster, and many years before that as a fan. And I would stand by that. It was truly extraordinary. So for those of you who have indulged us in chatting a little bit about MMA and UFC, I hope you enjoyed the conversation. And we'll be back to boxing in the next couple, but this gave us a chance to talk about what was an extraordinary night in combat sports.